So I told you guys about the order for spiders in the class Arachnida, where you had the order Araneae and the order Opleones. Now I'm going to take the time to tell you about the insects for your insect collection. So we're in the domain Eukarya still, the kingdom Animalia. Now we're moving on to in the phylum Arthropoda, but now we're moving to the subphylum Hexapoda. The subphylum Hexapoda has three tagmata, so it has a head, thorax, and abdomen. And there are 5 pairs of appendages on the head. Some of them are for the mouth, some of them are for the antennae. There are 3 pairs of legs on the thorax, so every insect has 6 legs. There are 2 classes in there. There's Entognatha, which is going to have some columbolans, the proturarians, and the diplarians. It is not monophyletic. It's actually a group coming off of more than one branch off the tree. And then the one that we really need to talk about is class Insecta. So class Insecta has that 3 tagmata. It has the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. The thorax is broken into 3 sections: the prothorax, right here in the beginning, the mesothorax in the middle, and the metothorax in the end, and then the abdomen. Insects can fly, not all of them do, but can fly. And there's 2 ways that they fly. They either fly with direct or synchronous flight, and that means there's muscles actually on the wing, and each muscle makes a wing beat once. Flap, muscle contracts, wings flap, muscle contracts, wings flap. The way you would think, the way your arms would work. That's a direct or asynchronous or synchronous flight. The indirect or asynchronous flight is where the muscle actually changes, like bends the exoskeleton, and then it kind of makes the wings shake. And you can get one nerve impulse will make the wings shake 50 times. So you get 50 wing cycles. It's a very fibular flight motion. So those wings will move much quicker. So again, for the synchronous, you have the muscles at the base of the wing, and the muscles pull and the wing comes down, and the muscles relax and the wings go up, and that just keeps going like that. For asynchronous, these move and it changes the shape of the exoskeleton, and then when it releases, these shake or do a shaking motion to create the flight. There's other ways that insects move. They can walk, run, jump, or swim. They usually have biting or chewing mouth parts. So if you look at the insect mouth here, you can see they have a labrum, a mandible. Labrums are a sensory upper lip. It kind of feels that the food is there. It has the mandibles, which are good for grinding and cutting. It has the maxillae, which are good for cutting and also, again, for sensory. And the labium, which is a sensory lower lip. So if you look at this picture, you can see the labium here, and that is the sensory lower mouth lip. And you can see the labrum, and you can see the mandible here, which is going to do the cutting of the food. There are other kinds of mouth parts for different kinds of insects. There's sucking mouth parts that have, like the butterfly, mosquitoes, moths. They're going to have something that will suck either nectar, blood, whatever. And in the case of butterflies, they have this nice coiled proboscis, and they will uncoil it when they go to suck. If you've ever been to a butterfly house, a butterfly can land on you. You'll actually watch this happen. It's kind of interesting. Houseflies use a sponging motion. They actually just kind of soak up the food that they're eating. They don't actually do the chewing. After the food is brought in through their mouth, it goes through their digestive tract, and that's broken into 3 parts: the foregut, midgut, and hindgut. The foregut is the first part, and it has a pharynx, and that's good for sucking. And then there's a crop, and just like a bird has a crop, it's a storage area. Food just hangs out there for a little bit. And then it goes into the proventriculus and may even grind the food like a gizzard in a bird. And so that's how they chew their food. They don't chew it with their mouth. They'll rip it and tear it with the mouth, but then the proventriculus will do the grinding. Then the food will go to the midgut, the middle, and that's where it'll break down and absorb the nutrients, will absorb into the animal. And then it'll go through the hindgut where any extra water is reabsorbed. That's like the colon for a human. So that way they don't release way too much water and dehydrate. So here is a picture of the different digestive tract. You have the mouth, the food will go in the mouth, through the salivary glands, and then it'll go through the gastric ceca, so here's the foregut, midgut, and then hindgut. So here is where it's grinding, it's stored in the crop, grinding, and then up through the rectum for digestion or for absorbing the extra water, and the digestion happens here in this big blue region. Okay. The tracheae for gas exchange are these little tubes throughout their body that carry oxygen to the actual tissues. It has chitin in it, which just makes it firm, and it's open through the spiracles. Spiracles are holes at the sides of the insect. So if you look at some of your larger insects, you're going to see dark spots on their sides. That's actually where oxygen comes in. So if your insect didn't actually die fully and you pinned it and then it started moving and you're like, oh no, putting a cotton ball with the acetone near its nose is not actually going to help it die because it doesn't breathe through its nose the way we do. It's different. Instead, you want to put the cotton ball on its sides because that's where the oxygen's going in and that's where the gas or the acetone will go in to help it die. So it'll lead in and go into the tissues where each cell can get the oxygen it needs. And as they walk or fly, that causes the movement. So contraction of the flight muscles will compress and expand the tracheal trunks. And then carbon dioxide and bicarbonate will actually allow for kind of a suction. So air wants to come in. So here you can see this is a beetle and it has these spiracles here at the end. And then it goes through the tracheae, which are these tubes, and brings the oxygen directly in. So here's the spiracle. Here's the body wall. Oxygen comes in and it spreads throughout the trachea until it gets to the muscles, the tissues. They have an open circulatory system and a contractile dorsal vesicle. The dorsal contractile vesicle is going to act like its heart. It's going to be along the back and it's going to squeeze. It'll distribute the nutrients from the food, the hormones, and the waste, but not oxygen and carbon dioxide very much. That's really just going to happen through the trachea. That is different than humans. Humans, our blood will carry our oxygen, but for insects, it is not carried that way. For temperature regulation, they have to keep their body at a regular temperature, just like pretty much all living things do. And that's really important to make sure the muscles work for flight. So when they need to get warm so they can actually fly away, they will bask or rest on warm surfaces, just like a reptile will do. And they'll also might use their flight muscles to shiver to help warm up their body. And if they get too hot, they're going to find cool, moist environments. In the summer, you can often find animal or insects under leaves and under rocks and stuff like that, where they're cooling themselves off. So they have for their brain, they don't have an actual big old brain. What they have are ganglion. Ganglion are groups of nerves working together that kind of act like a brain, but they have more than one. So there's the super esophageal ganglion. That is a group of nerves above the esophagus, and that acts and kind of controls the feeding portion. Then there's the subesophageal ganglion. That's going to be below the esophagus, and that's going to help control more of the rest of the digestion. And then it goes, the ventral nerve cord goes from there, and it has little ganglion to work each section. So the ganglion by each leg and all the way throughout the body. They have several different ways of sensing, they're getting the sensory information. They have mechanoreceptors, so that's going to be feel. They have setae, which are little hairs and stretch receptors, so they can feel when things move around them. Hearing, they have Johnston's organs and tympanal organs. Tympanal organs are going to be like your eardrum is your tympanum, and that shakes to transmit sound into the brain. They have chemoreception to pick up chemicals either in their food or in their environment. So the mouth parts, well, again, the labium and labium will pick up the sensory so they can know if the food is something that they want. And then their antenna and their legs also will pick up chemicals in the air so they can taste or smell. It's kind of like smell the air or taste the air, knowing that they want those food around them. And then they have their vision. They have a compound eye, and that compound eye will see a little more distinct images. And then they have ocelli, which are simple eyes that really just pick up light. The compound eyes have lots of little lenses called amatidia. Sorry. They fuse into this multifaceted eye. So they see kind of like if you're looking through a prism where you have all the different facets. It detects movement, it detects UV light, and even direction of polarization. So it gives them a more complete picture than some of the other arthropods have. The ocelli are just these single lenses, and they're really just detecting light intensity. So it's really probably pretty important on that daily rhythm, like, oh, it's getting to be night, it's time to go to bed, or whatever. It helps them identify that type of day. So this is a picture of a fly's compound eye, and you can see all those little lenses that create a complex picture. And here is a view of one of them closer. And so this is what we see, but they can actually see ultraviolet lights. This is what they see, or closer to the closest adaptation as what we can see. So you can see that they can see actually the UV light that shows the difference in the plant. To get rid of waste, they use their Malpighian tubules. Their Malpighian tubules end at their gut, and then the waste goes into their gut and out through their anus. It transports ions, uric acid, and water. It's not like the ones from spiders, the arachnids. These Malpighian tubules really do act very much like the kidneys. The arachnids didn't fully act like the kidneys. Then there's the rectum. The rectum is going to get rid of more of the solid waste, the waters, ions, and any organic compounds that have been removed from the food they ate. So pretty much the poop. Here is a Malpighian tubule, or well, here's the midgut and the hindgut. You see the Malpighian tubules off of the midgut here. And so water and sodium and potassium and uric acid will dissolve in and out through that. And then it'll continue, the waste will go through the hindgut to the rectum where the solid waste and the waste from the Malpighian tubules will all then leave. Insects have to have chemicals in their body to control their whole body. So they have their endocrine system, which is their hormone system that helps them do their ecdysis, which is their molting. So there's the subesophageal gland that will produce ecdysizotropin. Not quite how you pronounce it, but that's as good as I can do at the moment. And that's going to be one of the one of the hormones that makes them start the process of molting. They also have the corpora sarcadia. That is going to be the thoracotropin hormone. And then there's the prothoracic gland, which produces ecdysone, and it specifically initiates the ecdysis, the molting. For an insect to go from a juvenile to an adult, it has the corpora allata, which produces juvenile hormone. It's really concentrated in the hemocoel, which is the blood cavity. It's not really blood, it's a hemolymph, but it's their blood substance in their blood cavity. And determines when they're going to molt, if they're going to produce their wings or not. And it's what goes from immature to eventually mature adult. So insects will go through more than one molt, and they'll start out being too young, won't have the reproductive organs, or they won't be active, they won't have their wings. And then as they grow to adulthood, where their reproductive organs are then functioning, and then their wings are functioning too. So this corpora allata will help that produce those hormones. Insects also produce pheromones. Pheromones are chemicals that help them communicate with each other. So Ants that use this for their lining motion, where they all walk in the nice line. And if you've ever seen the movie Ants, which I'm pretty sure most of you have, so like somebody dropped something by the insects or by the ants, and one of them was like, "I lost," because the smell of the food that dropped there stopped the pheromones from the people in front of them, the insects in front of them, so they didn't know to keep walking. That's very similar to how ants actually walk. They use their pheromones to follow a path. So there's a bunch of different kinds of pheromones. There's the sex pheromones that allow them to say, "Hey, you're a female and you're ready to mate. Let's mate." So this is how they produce young. There's caste regulating pheromones. So specifically like bees, you have a queen bee, and then all the other females in the bee world are not going to reproduce. The only reproducing female is the queen, and that's because she produces this royal jelly, which has a pheromone in it that keeps all the other female insects from developing into adulthood, so they cannot have babies. There's aggregation pheromones that says, "Hey, come on over here. There's lots of food over here." So certain bark beetles produce this, and that makes them aggregate on a tree where they can eat and digest that tree. There's alarm pheromones that say, "Hey, there's some issue here. Somebody's trying to attack us. Run." A sting from one bee alarms other bees in the area. So that way, if you've gotten stung by one bee, it sends out a pheromone that makes the other bees think, "Oh no, we're going to go. There's somebody attacking. We might have to sting too." And so that puts them in attack mode a little more, makes them know that to be on alert. So if you're stung by one bee, it's actually better to just get out of the way and not harm any other bees. And then there's the trailing pheromones, like in ants, where they are following each other based on that. Then there's reproduction. Reproduction for most insects, especially the terrestrial insects, are going to require internal fertilization. So that means they're going to need a copulatory structure. For humans, that's a penis, something that passes the sperm to the female. It is not going to be a penis for insects. They do not have a penis. They have some sort of copulatory structure, though. Depends on what type of insect. And they have these complex interactions between the insect and their environment and how they are going to reproduce. They have indirect fertilization often, especially in Thysaneria and Columbola. Those two orders are going to the insects are going to release a little packet of sperm, and then the female will take that in to fertilize her eggs. So that only happens in those two orders. Most insects will do some form of copulation, which is sex. So they use their pheromones to indicate whether or not they are compatible. There's also visual signals. Different species of lightning bugs have different types of flashing, different patterns of flashing. So if you look out there and watch the different patterns of flashing, you can actually tell different species of lightning bugs based on that. Now in this area, we're going to have more of one type, so you may not notice that difference. And then there's auditory signals, like in crickets, where they do their sound, and that helps other insects to know that there is a male in that region, and so females know that they can reproduce, or other males will know that that area is taken, so they will go find their own area. For copulation, again, they don't have a penis, but there is a copulatory appendage, a modified limb that will transfer the sperm. And then females often, not always, have something called an ovipositor. As you're collecting, especially your crickets and your grasshoppers, you may notice some of them have something that kind of looks like a piece of a stick sticking out of their butt, a little brown piece of wood sticking out of their butt, kind of curves up. If you see that, that's a female. And what that is her ovipositor. And all it really is a shovel. So she uses that curved stick looking thing, the ovipositor, to dig a hole in the ground so she can release her fertilized eggs in there. And then she covers them up, and her eggs are protected, and then they can turn into babies. Insects will go through in direct development and metamorphosis, depending on how they go for it. And it's a direct or indirect metamorphosis. So there's ametabolous metamorphosis. These are going to be when adults and larvae are similar, except for their body size and sexual maturity. So these are going to be your Thysanuras. what happens is when they're born, they look just like adults, but they just need to grow bigger, and then their reproductive organs need to develop. This is going to be very much like humans. So if you need to think about that, it's very much like humans. A baby looks like an adult. One head, two arms, two legs. Everything is the same, but it just grows larger and then becomes sexually mature. But in insects, then there's hemimetabolous metamorphosis. These are going to be when there's a difference between an egg and an adult, but not a huge difference. And the immature form will gradually take on the adult form. So these are going to be nymphs or naiads. Um, so nymphs are going to be the terrestrial insects, and naiads are aquatic insects. So those wings will develop as it gets older. So the babies won't have wings, but later as they grow and molt, they will get their wings. And so there's going to be some body change difference, but not a huge body change difference. Then there's holometabolous metamorphosis. And I remember this like whole metamorphosis. It fully changes. So that means that there's a specific number of instars or stages of changes between egg and adult. And the immature form is very different. They live in a different place. They have a different form than adults, caterpillars versus butterflies. The immature form is the larvae, and then the larva will form into a pupa, which is going to be the immobile form, and then it'll turn into the adult. So here is a hemimetabolous change. You have the egg. Here is the nymph. Now, its basic body structure is very similar, but notice no wings. And it gets larger and it gets larger and starts to look more like it until it eventually becomes a full adult with its wings. So its basic structure is the same, but it doesn't look exactly the same. That's hemimetabolous. Holometabolous is a full change. You have the egg, it turns into a larva. In this case, we're looking at a fly, so this is a maggot, and then a larger size maggot, and then it goes into the immobile form, the pupa, and then it emerges as an adult. So here was a crawling, inching, no wings, not the same body structure at all, until it becomes the full-fledged adult. And when it's in the pupa form, it actually turns like into goo. Like all of these tissues break down and reemerge into the new form. So it's a huge change in that pupa stage. Now let's talk insect behavior. A lot of insects are social insects, especially the Hymenoptera and the Isoptera. They have a caste system. So there's going to be the queen. She's the reproductive female, the one reproductive female. Then there are worker bees or worker Isopteras are going to be your termites. They're going to be sterile females, sometimes males, but mostly sterile females. So they're going to do the work. They're sterile. They don't have babies. They are not able to reproduce because of that royal jelly. There's going to be kings or drones. Now the drones are going to be more common in the bee world. Those are the reproductive males. They are giving the sperm to the queen to create the babies. And then there's our soldiers, which are going to be sterile and they're going to have large mandibles and they're going to be there to protect the female. In honeybees, they have three castes, the worker, drones, and queens. The workers, again, are always female. Their job is to construct a comb, gather nectar, pollen, feed the queen, feed the drones, care for the babies, and clean and defend the hive. So they do all the hard work. The drones are male. They actually are haploids. So these are actually eggs from the queen that have never been fertilized. They just develop. So they're really just male clones of the female. So they have half of our information. They turn into males. And their job is to fertilize eggs. Now, in general, the drones of males will not work with the queen of their own colony. They will actually do some moving around. So that way the new queen, that way you're not having, you get that change of genetic information. Then there's the queen. She releases that royal jelly, that caste regulating pheromone, and that keeps up all the other females from rearing into a new queen. So the royal jelly is fed to the larva as the queen ages. So she'll feed the baby females this royal jelly and they'll start to develop into queens. So at first there's more than one. And they will actually fight because there can only be one queen. So they'll fight, and then the strongest queen will emerge. And that remaining queen will then go on a mating flight. She will go get sperm from other colonies, and then she will return to the colony and grow, and she'll live for several years, passing on that genetic information. So here is 3 honeybees. The largest one is going to be your queen bee. This is going to be the worker bee, and this is going to be your drone bee. Insects provide a lot of human value resources for humans. They make wax, honey, silk. They pollinate 65% of our plant species. So it's really important to have insects in our world to make sure our plants get fertilized. They also do biological control and kind of protect against each other and other things. They crawl through soil. They all aerate the soil, which will help increase our plant growth. Their waste, their poop, will actually enrich the soil so the plants will grow better. We can use them in teaching, which we're currently doing in this class, for research and hobby collecting, which you guys are doing, maybe not for a hobby, but you're collecting as a hobby collector for my class. Then there's also pests. There's ones that carry insects or parasites that cause problems. They can also destroy our crops and disease transmission. So we have to make sure we are keeping the valuable insects around and only hurting the pest insects when we're working with our crops. That's where I'm going to stop for this video. So this told you about insects. The next video, which I will do, is going to be about the insect orders and how and which ones, how different insects fit into those orders. So we talked about their digestive system, their reproductive system, their nervous system, and their respiratory system throughout this. So take the time to make sure you go over that, and I will talk to you guys later.